I'll be starting in just a couple of minutes. Glad to see the room filling in. I'm always curious when I present a topic like this that could probably span multiple audiences where everyone's interests lie. So, if you'd like to post a message in the session chat, not the whole event chat, but the session chat of what your role is in Drupal, what your relationship is, a site builder, are you a back-end developer writing code, or you someone in a more of a business analyst role? I'll be happy to focus some of my examples to meet the needs of the audience. But I have a feeling it's going to be a big enough group that I'm probably going to have to save some of the more nitty gritty stuff to the end of the presentation. Also, I just see a lot of familiar faces, so that's exciting. Well, hello, everyone. I'm going to get started because I have so much to share today. I want to introduce myself. I'm Jim Vomero, and we're here to talk people first content migration. So, that is editorial workflows, adding collaborative tools that move our content through Drupal CMS. Um, to be honest, the out of the box Drupal workflow is fairly flat. Everything's either published or it's not. And there are some more popular modules that can help us, as long as some custom code where we can better match the functions in Drupal to the roles in our organization. And I want to just look at how to get started and organize the planning of these tools. So we're going to start by discussing editorial processes used by digital marketers and how we can better map these processes to states and transitions in Drupal. I'd like to review some of the popular modules for extending your workflow. And finally, I'll leave a lot of time at the end to dig into code examples and real life examples so we can just see where the audience's group is, where your interest is. I hope you leave this session feeling empowered to use some of the Drupal content moderation tools in your future projects. But I also hope you learn about some of the challenges and the costs and really the risks involved in setting up these content management features. So I said, my name is Jim Vomero, and I'm a senior engineer at Four Kitchens. I have over 10 years experience in Drupal, and I use the framework to support all my nerdy hobbies, from homebrewing beer calculations on a Drupal site to planning my retro arcade projects to teaching kids how to prepare for the zombie apocalypse at Philadelphia area summer camps. If you have any questions after this presentation, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always excited to talk shop and keep this conversation going. I am NJim on all the things, including Drupal Slack and in the GovCon Slack. And I work at Four Kitchens, so feel free to email me at my company. We build websites and applications for organizations that depend on large scale or unconventional content. So to start today, I want to think about, how does an idea become something real? A landing page, a blog post, a marketing campaign, that published thing on the web really is what we're talking about in the context of Drupal. And for me, I'm a list person. That's my creative process. I keep lists of everything from side projects I have going on to checklists for routine tasks so I never forget something. I live by my to-do lists. I will create something, put it on a to-do list just to cross it off to call it to done. That's my process. I like rigidity, checkboxes, buttons, visuals, and that will show me how my work is moving through a pipeline. But I know that's not true for everybody. Some of my friends are pioneers. They're spontaneous and decisive. They like to create and share things early and just get feedback. And they want that collaboration early and often in a project. And some of my other friends are integrators. They're looking for consensus. And They're the type that may not want to share their ideas until it's a little more polished, and they may shy away from using tools that foster collaboration early or shine a spotlight on unfinished work. So as we're thinking about process, I would say before creating any digital workflow, I want to document the existing processes of the people that are in are going to be using the tool, because I'm describing something that's very personal and sometimes very conflicting ways of working. And so I start with stakeholder interviews to get a clearer picture of the editorial needs from the people who are going to use the system most. This is probably my biggest preachy part, because without these insights, without these interviews, anything I create is going to be biased to my own creative process. And it's a huge responsibility writing software that dictates how somebody else works. So creating interfaces that are too rigid or don't allow for collaboration are going to stifle good ideas or maybe impose an unwanted layer of governance. So let's make sure that we're building things that are inclusive and empowering to our users. And I want to start with a real example. This is an organization I've worked with in higher education, a former client of mine, and it's folks in a marketing and communication team at this large university. So hundreds of people act as content contributors across the organization, and they're contributing to the team's digital channels. For an example, I want to say our contributor is an employee at the university's nature center, and they're going to host their annual bird watching competition. It's part of their spring festival. They're going to work with a strategist. Let's click. There we go. They're going to work with a strategist who's going to oversee a portfolio of digital marketing campaigns. And the pair are going to flesh out what their content looks like. They're probably going to decide that this campaign needs a page, an event page in their Drupal CMS, and an Eventbrite or whatever their event management system is. At some point, they're going to tag in a copywriter and someone from the creative services team. These are the people who are going to actually flesh out what the copy looks like, making sure it's on brand, it's following the correct asset management standards, and that everything is delivered appropriately to university standards. When the copy's ready and everyone's happy with it, they'll tag in the CMS team. This is the folks that are in Drupal every day, along with an editor who's reviewing content for brand, language, tone, accessibility, all the things that we need to comply with as part of this large organization. And eventually, there's going to be some other folks who jump in to push this out to the social media channels, the email list distributions for folks who maybe attended last year. So social team and we'll say the CRM team here. There's a lot of processes that folks have, and each one is unique, and the tools they use are quite different too. So the contributor using Evernote, that's her tool of choice. The strategist has a Trello board with all the other strategists so they can maintain an editorial, like a campaign calendar, but they use Office 365 at the university. Widen is used as the dam for creative. Drupal is used, but we said Eventbrite would also be a part of this. Hootsuite is used for pushing out to digital channels. Salesforce is the CRM. Everyone is working in their separate systems, and it can be quite overwhelming. It even gets more complicated when we talk about how do they communicate with one another, whether it's Zoom meetings, collaboration in gathered content. That's been a popular one I've integrated with a lot lately. The email, Slack. Don't underestimate the value of cookies to get to the top of a Jira list. That will definitely get you a high priority. Microsoft Teams. It starts to feel a little bit like the technology Thunderdome, and it's overwhelming. I think we can all relate to this madness, at least at some level. And we need some way to rein it in and reimagine this. And what can we do to improve this on at least the Drupal side of things? So what does a Drupal workflow look like for this team? And I'm going to offer 3 approaches. The first is the feature-rich CMS. And this is where we build all the features that we love into Drupal. So in this case, the CMS team and the editor, they're already managing content in Drupal, but maybe we add an intake form using either content types, web forms, or some separate mechanism where the contributor can submit their ideas to an editorial calendar and the strategist can review, prioritize, and take the intake requests there. Now, the copywriter was using gather content, but it would be hard to add some additional features to the content type, some fields that capture things like audience, keywords, the things that the copywriter needs to finish out their tasks. Likewise, we can replace a lot of the tools in, I think the creative person was using Widen in their digital asset management system by using Drupal's media library. And we can enhance and extend Drupal's media library till it is a fully feature-rich DAM. Even onto the social media, we can publish right to Twitter, to Facebook, to a number of social channels directly from Drupal, scheduling those interactions. We can send emails through relays, still using Salesforce, but through Drupal. This would be amazing, one-stop shop to rule them all. But the truth is, Drupal's not a one-size-fits-all platform. It's designed to be customized, but trying to satisfy all of these folks is just often a horrible idea. It's unrealistic to expect all your stakeholders to ditch their external existing processes for a brand new homemade, homebrewed set of tools. And so I think we should just say that no website platform can be the best tool for everybody and still be efficient. And so with that, let's start to accept that some of these other tools are important, and just to give some personal experience, creating a DAM in Drupal, very possible, but often you end up with a lower quality DAM than if you had the budget to pay for the one that fits your needs. Maybe. That depends on your organization. I recently built a full digital asset management system for a university, and it's exactly what they needed. Likewise with Salesforce, there's so much business logic that goes into this application that maybe for both of these cases, the most appropriate thing is just an API integration. So that becomes approach 2. Let's add functionality, but just through integrations, leveraging APIs to extend Drupal to work in these spaces that already work for our stakeholders. Simply put, building custom solutions into your CMS will never satisfy everyone's need and won't be cost effective. So a developer, while we can create functionality that pushes content out to Facebook and Twitter, it's never going to work as well as Hootsuite. And even if we develop the connection to Facebook and Twitter, what happens when the newest social media trend comes on and now we need to push out to TikTok? So it becomes a non-scalable solution in any realistic way. So instead, let's consider middleware. This is approach 2, where it's appropriate, using tools like Gather Content or whatever our CMS is, or I'm sorry, our web DAM is, whenever that makes sense. Drupal has a lot of great out-of-the-box modules for these tools already that we can use to extend our content. Now approach 3, and this is the choose your own adventure module model. So let's build tools in the areas where we can get the most value. Let's leverage APIs when it makes sense to automate tasks. And let's say no to reinventing features that just don't make sense. You don't need to reinvent the wheel for the parts of your workflow that are already running smoothly. So in that first section, I said, let's do some stakeholder interviews. Let's figure out what's working really well and try not to get in the way. The choose your own adventure model, there is a lot to consider when we talk editorial workflow. And this becomes a caution that I'm going to hit on a little later. While it's easy to turn on, say, the content moderation piece in Drupal, there's a number of downstream tasks that become more relevant. And so as an editor logging into the site, I need to answer the question, what do I need to approve? I actually just got an over here email notification. Oh no, here they are. Communications. I got an email notification saying that something needed to be approved. I log into the site. How do I find it? So now we're talking about dashboards. We're talking about individual roles having spaces in Drupal to figure out what their actions need to be. We're talking about new levels of reporting and communications, new types of controls, and the ability to allow folks to interact on the platform together so they're not overriding each other's work, that we can preview revisioning. It's overwhelming. Where do we get started? I guess this slide is mostly a cautionary note to remind you there's a lot that can be involved in workflow and it shouldn't be taken lightly. So where can we get started? That's content moderation. And it's the one I'm going to focus on today, along with a module roundup of showing how we can not only make this happen fairly easily, but some other ones that we can extend the features of Drupal and build out some more advanced features. So you probably saw in the description of this session, I'm going to walk through 3 different content models. The first is a standard publishing workflow, and Drupal's content moderation module is going to give you something like this out of the box. I'm talking about content moderation. I will give a shout out to Workbench later on. So the idea here, and this is a diagram I make for any site where I'm building a workflow, is I have a series of boxes, and these boxes are the states of content as it moves through your organization's workflow. And this is a super generic publishing workflow where something starts as a draft. The arrows are transitions. We can make as many edits and saves to this draft as we like. So this is a circular reference. I can continue to work on it until I am ready for, let's say, an editor to review it. I click a button, so I hit this transition. The screen transition says send to review, and now I'm in a new state. The content's in for review. The editor can make changes, or perhaps they have a question and they say, these dates seem off. Was this accidentally last year's dates? We request changes. It removes back to draft status. So work can move forward or backwards. Wherever we draw these arrows, that becomes a possible transition. And we can get to a published state. And that's what this little icon is here. I'm using the globe to say this version is now live to the world. It's also important. This is just a lesson learned to always have some way to move content out of a workflow. There's any number of reasons why content needs to be removed from the site right away. And so you don't want to find yourself caught in a tough place where the organization needs content taken off the site and there's not a way to physically do it. Maybe you don't even have delete access to that type of content. So one final state called archive, which it's no longer published, but the content's still there for future reasons. If that's part of your organization's history, that you maintain a log of past content. There's another piece to content moderation. That's what happens when we make changes to live content. So we have content that's already live, and content moderation in Drupal out of the box has a feature, I'll do a demo later, where you can have a live version of the page. So the About Us page is live, but we're adding a new board member. And so we create a new draft that exists in parallel. So there's a live version, and now there's this latest version that's a draft. The draft moves through the same transition of sending for review. The review is approved and published. And now this published one is the new draft, and the old version is now archived content. So we'll take a peek at that. That's the very easy content moderation. How does content move forward in a workflow? A more complicated example is looking at a job application system. And I run a series of summer camps in the Philadelphia area. So this is my workflow. In this case, the applications come in. This is a job application content type, and anonymous users can submit them, but they cannot view them. So an anonymous person can submit their job application. And then we have three possible transitions. I can offer them an interview. I can say, oh, geez, we already filled enough positions for this role, but I'd like to keep their application on standby as a future prospect for next summer. Or they're just not the right fit for the job and we're going to reject them. So I have three possible transitions from the submitted status. From requested interview, we can offer them position. And from after we offer them position, if they accept it, they're hired. And so our states are submitted, request interview, offer sent, hired, future prospect, rejected. And you'll notice published. Published is a default state that's going to come with content moderation. I just don't want any lines getting here. I don't want it that our job application information can ever be seen from the live world. So I've made sure there are no transitions that get content to the published state. And the final example I want to show off is a help desk ticketing system. Once again, I'm just looking at the states and transitions, and then we're going to take a look at what this looks like in Drupal. So a new ticket comes into the system, and there might be multiple ways this happens, but let's assume there's a form on the website where a user can say, I'm having a problem. My computer keeps crashing when I try to open this software. New tickets are sent to the help desk where somebody acts as like the ticket expediter and decides which bucket this is going to fall into. Is this an issue, something's broken, or an access request? And that is to say, somebody needs access as an editor to this website. Those are going to be two different teams and with very different workflows. Access requests are fairly straightforward. Either the user gets access or they don't. And intake issues, this requires maybe some triage up front, finding how big the problem is, what priority is. So this is a much more advanced workflow. I did build a system like this, pardon me, for a university, and it actually had 5 or 6 different branches. So being able to request training was one of them. Asking for hardware was another, being able to request hardware like a projector for your lab. And so there were different workflows for each one of these, but the idea was the same. It's states and transitions. So a new ticket might come onto an issue queue. And at this point, the expediter says, okay, I know this team is in charge of it. So one of the things that we were able to build into this was that a workflow permission-based system where your team can only see the tickets that found its way onto your branch of the editorial workflow experience. So only issues that had these states were seen by our tech support help team, and only issues with these states were able to be seen on our access control administration team. Not a very difficult challenge to overcome. It's just looking and comparing the state of the content to the current workflow state and determining visibility, whether it's allowed or not. I can show some examples of that too if you have interest. From here, the issue was assigned a member. Reporting was a big part of this, right? How long did an issue stay unresolved was a measure of success for the help desk team. So the issue is assigned for whatever reason. Maybe there wasn't enough information. We couldn't reproduce it. It might be placed on hold or moved back to assign once we're ready to work on it. Sometimes it was a non-issue. Couldn't reproduce. We've all been there. The issue was outright closed. Or maybe there was a fix. And so we apply the fix, check to see if this is still a problem. And if it is still a problem, great, we'll work on it more. If it's not, the issue is resolved. So the boxes, once again, are our states of our content, and the arrows are our different transitions. I make a diagram like this for every website I work on. All right, that was a lot of talk. Let's get a look at what this looks like inside the context of a Drupal site. Here we go. I'm running a site on Lando, and it's a fairly simple boilerplate content, but I want to show off at least two of these editorial workflows. The first was the sort of publishing workflow. And I do have some examples, some posts. Let me create a new one as well. So I'd like to add a new post to our blog. It's going to have a title. I should probably have something more interesting than just test, but that's what we're getting. And because I have the content moderation turned on, I see by default it is being saved as draft. You can use the field API. So as you get into your content types, you can manage the form display and hide this if this is something you don't want your users to be able to see. But I'm going to assume that this is a small enough team. I have some debug things turned on, so please excuse any of these errors. They're unrelated to today's work. So I now have my test content testing workflow, and my content has been created. I can continue to edit this and make changes. I realize this isn't very exciting, but I'm getting there, I promise. Change it to a draft. So that is that creating a circular reference, continuing to make changes. When I'm ready, I can send a message to our editors. I'll transition this from draft to in review. Nothing too exciting. This is something you would have seen in Drupal 10 years ago. It's just become a lot easier over time. A few things that I do want to show off is there is a project I'll show where we can look at sidebars, being able to move transitions from here, adding custom log messages. And so this adds some contextual, there's just a little contextual palette of what am I able to do. I'm logged in as admin user 1, so I have access to everything. But an author may only have the ability to make changes, editing the current content, or request review. So being able to give them a simplified view of what actions they can take on any given piece of content. And since this is our first one, I just want to take a peek at what this looks like when it's live. Oops. Let's look at the content list. And here is a sample post. So my content is live. I see the status of this node is published, and there are still some actions I can take, but this content is live. How did this come to be? Very quickly, and I'll do more examples in the Q&A part if you're interested. Under configuration, workflows, workflows. We see that I defined two workflows, and the one that we've been going through right now is this publishing workflow. You can create a new one just by adding a new workflow, but we're going to edit this. And there are two things defined. They are those boxes, which were the states, draft, published, in review, archived, and our transitions. And I just named them create new draft, send for review, request changes, publish, archived. Oh, and immediate publish. That was another one. So a tip that I've learned through some content, I said start with stakeholder interviews, is I found a number of these sites were small enough that the editor was the one creating the content. and that content going to a draft state just didn't make sense. They needed a way to immediately publish it. So imagine this with yet another transition, an arrow that goes from draft to immediate publish. This is important because you don't want to turn your workflow into an exercise of routine button clicking. It's arbitrary, it's not helpful, and that was something I discovered early on through stakeholder interviews. Another one was the ability for folks to know when content was important to them. So in the example of this content moderation for a help desk, let's say there is a team that reports out all pending changes for the upcoming release. So software is released on a 2-week cadence. All bug fixes hit in this issue pending approval state, and we need to be able to generate a report on that. An example of this, I worked for a healthcare company recently. Their editorial workflow was very advanced, and they needed to be able to have physicians and clinicians approve all changes before they hit the website. So we added a new box to their diagram that was the physician and clinician approval. And when content was in that state, it went into a custom view so that these users, when they logged into Drupal, the very first thing they saw were all pending changes for the physician and clinician approval. So know that these boxes and arrows might seem very simple, but it was a launching point for all the future conversations of who is using this site and when. In fact, the next thing I would probably annotate these boxes with is where are notifications set out and where do I need to add dashboards for individual users. So I'd probably say that in a new ticket creation, an email is going to go out to the general help desk ticket expediter. When an issue is assigned to a team, it's going to get sent to that team's listserv. When a comment is left on an assigned issue, that comment is going to go to the person who is either assigned that ticket or the person who originally owns the issue, or both. So the next thing I would probably add to this diagram is annotations and comments and things of that nature. The technical pieces, I'm not going to dive in too deeply unless you have questions or if there's time at the end, because there's a fair amount of documentation on how to create these states and transitions. I just want to point out some of the ones that were the hardest lessons learned. I'm going to edit the published state, and you'll see that, actually, this is not the best example. Let's, that was a transition. Let's go to the published state. You'll see that there is this checkbox that says published. This is important. If you are like me with my job application, I didn't want to publish state. I need to leave this unchecked, but I did want to publish state, and I want that publish state to be the default revision. I can't uncheck this because there's already content in the workflow. But this is the case, pardon me, where when content reaches that state, all other revisions become unpublished. So being able to check these boxes is the one that allows the first revision to get through the workflow to take priority over others. That was another hard lesson learned, is figuring out how does one revision supersede another, especially on workflows where there might be several collaborators. All right, back to the demo. I wanted to show off one other thing, which I kind of glossed over. And I said that when building out these states and transitions, there are different people whose eyes are going to be on the site at different times. And I think the most important lesson I've learned is the need for content moderation dashboards. The ability for users of different audiences to see and interact with content in a way that makes sense to them. So for the example of the job application, I wanted to have a board that when someone logged in, if you're part of the recruitment team, this is the very first thing you saw on the website. It's just a Drupal view. Admin content applications is the URL I gave it. Here's the view. And I put a custom block, some simple HTML at the top that shows me all of the different applications and what state they are currently in. If I click on one of these, it's going to change this view below to show me, let me just see who's been hired. And it will change the view below to show me the hired applicants. Going back to manage applications, once again, can't stress this enough. This is just a view, but this was me, in this case, learning that there's a core group of people, the job application, the hiring team, that when they log in, this is the first thing they should see. I added the 5-star module so that they would be able to rate and see the aggregate score of each one of the job applicants. I took what was text and I replaced it with images using a very simple template theme. So I can show an example of that if you're interested in the custom code. So I can see from this job application who checked the box that they're willing to work overnight, who checked the box that they are available for the staff training on May 17th. I can link to their resume. I can link to their job application. Let's look at a list that has even more. I can see their positions, but this is just a view. And the only piece of complicated custom code is this one right here. I've shared all my code on GitHub, so this is something you can do as well. I just created a custom field that says, hey, for this piece of content, what are all of the possible transitions that make sense for this? So from someone who's in the submitted state, if you remember, there are 3 possible transitions. I can reject the applicant, I can save this applicant for next year, or I can offer them an interview. It's a shortcut to me clicking on this node and then using the workflow moderation tools on that node page. I wanted a dashboard where I can look at all of them at once, because sometimes a lot of applications come in at once. And I just need to bang, 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 offer a bunch of interviews. So that is the idea of having dashboards, hundreds of these over the years. So if you find that there's somebody in charge of accessibility, maybe the dashboard is related to looking at all of the media and identifying things like alt text. I know that's not all of accessibility, but it might be a good start to help those folks on your team. If you learn during their story that that's one of their hardest challenges is identifying media, create a dashboard for it. Maybe it's for the high-level manager who just needs to report statistics. What was published in the last week, in the last month, and how's it doing? Being able to show view statistics in this. So I will often create a series of dashboards for any of my site, one per content type or one per role at the very least, so that everyone interacting with your content workflows have a home base that's satisfying the needs that it came up over their stakeholder interviews. Happy to dive into this more, but I need to finish out some slides. Danger! Oh yeah, I'm glad I have this slide. Don't tread casually into editorial workflows. By designs, these mechanisms can change the way your teams work. So what may be empowering to one person might frustrate, sideline, or even disenfranchise others. Be ready to budget for a large project if you're taking on editorial workflows. Once you start to implement these features, you need to add more. I know I've already said this, but it needs to be said again. So for example, if you have a moderation state, you might need a dashboard, notifications, or other tools so the editors know what content is pending review and how to find it. A good example is using the diff module, which gets the job done, but sometimes needs some extra work. So the editor can see what was the one sentence in this 1,000 word post. What was the one sentence that changed that I need to keep my eyes on for approval and not have to read the entire thing? Diff gives you a red versus green. Finally, if you're new to allowing audiences to log into your site, be prepared to have some additional CMS work. So if you're taking on, if you're at a university and you have students contributing content for the first time, you're now giving students access to your CMS, you're going to want to check that those permissions are correct, that you haven't allowed authenticated users without even a role access to things that they shouldn't be allowed to. Finally, when you start going into the editorial workflow piece, you need to start emphasizing more on documentation, running training, and now you added a new layer of help desk because you have this group of contributors that need extra help. I want to finish out the formal part of my presentation with a module roundup. These are tools that I've used, some of which I just shown off, and that I think would be useful for you as well. First one is Workbench. When I did the demo of how the boxes and arrows became states and transitions, I was showing the default Drupal content moderation as part of workflows. There's another project called Workbench, which is great. Out of the box, it just works. It's fairly opinionated. And so if you find yourself working in a space where you need to customize things, Workbench is probably not the route you want to go. But if you're looking for just an easy setup, drop-in workflow tool, Workbench is worth exploring. And there's a whole suite of sub-modules to help it out with notifications, permissions, basically anything we talk about as far as those tools that empower workflow. Workbench has a variation of it. Everything else I want to talk about, though, is using the Drupal default workflows module. And moderation sidebar is the one I'm showing off here, where it slides out from the side and shows you some of the basic ways you can interact with the content. Another one, workflow buttons, is worth checking out. It replaces that normal drop down that says it's currently a draft, let's change it to pending review, and instead replaces it with the transition. So instead of having a list of states, it's a list of transitions as buttons. So similar to what I did with the view, being able to say, take this content and click a button to publish it, rather than having to pick the end state to publish it. And finally, scheduler. This is one I glazed over, but honestly, I've been using it more and more on sites, especially on sites that might launch a campaign. It's not just about putting one page live. It's a whole series of pages, blog posts, events page, because a conference is launching. And when you have all the details go live at the same time, the schedule modular has been a great way to publish or unpublish that content. For example, calls for proposals went down at midnight, be able to take that work offline and not having someone to stay awake. That was another one I learned in a stakeholder interview. They said the website works great, and then just casually mentioned how they hated when they would stay up till midnight to unpublish a page. And I was like, oh, I can fix that for you. Another one I found in stakeholder interviews is being able to clone content, although maybe I already have that on here. So being able to use the node clone or entity clone module was a lifesaver for some folks, and I found that through stakeholder interviews. Enhancing forms, auto entity label. This one's fantastic. So for my job application system, the default Drupal, I want to say, would be create job application, save job application, edit job application. These labels don't quite make sense for me in the context of the content type. So this module allows you to override, and actually this node override forms is another one, override some of the labeling of the form itself, the buttons, and the different states, how those things appear. So instead of saying create job application, it says join our summer camp team. Feel free to take a peek. These small tweaks just make things feel like we've shaken off the Drupalisms and made it more personalized for what that type of content is supposed to do. Entity redirect is an important one. 2 examples of where I've used that. In the job application system, when you finish filling out your application, I want to direct you to a thank you page. This is my chance to capture a success metric and say, ding, that ad I put out looking for summer camp staff was successful, and I can attribute Indeed as the lead source. This was also just a place to put more detailed information about next steps. So thank you for submitting application. We'll be in contact with you. Reach out to me with this number if you have any questions. So entity redirect allows you to redirect on submission. For the case of the help desk, what I found was that there was a lot of ways people were adding new tickets to the system. They might be an individual user submitting application or submitting help desk requests on a website. They might walk in to the desk manually or call on the phone. And in that case, the help desk was the one putting them into the website. And sometimes the help desk would have a long backlog of Post-it notes that they needed to add to the website. So entity redirect was nice because they would add one ticket, and then we had it redirect back to the form itself once they added one, so they can add another, add another, add another. There was another case of a user story showing just a small issue of them having to re-go to the add node form or bookmark the node add form. We said, no, we understand that's a pain point. Let's cut out a step for you. Hiding revision information is another one that's just more annoying. As you get more people into the system, the revision information isn't helpful for everybody. So in the case of the healthcare network I was working on, there was a number of collaborators that didn't want to know the inner workings of the CMS, and having things like the revision log was actually a distraction from the type of work they were wanting to do. So this is one way to simply hide things from that form that are normally there out of the box. And revision management. This is the piece I talked about a little bit about. Content lock is to prevent multiple people from writing at the content at the same time. I don't know of a PHP project that does that allows multiple users to edit the same node well. I've seen it, sort of a Google Docs or Gather content where you see multiple cursors on the screen. So content lock becomes our mechanism to make sure that only one person is editing the content at the time. And you can see an example of content that was locked to one user, and just when someone comes back to the site, do you want to continue to edit it? This was actually through the autosave form. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Continue editing what somebody had made, and it was from an autosave, or discard what that autosave was and start from scratch. The other two, I've mentioned diff before, and node revision delete. If you have a very collaborative website and you find that your team is putting content in early, iterating often, and every node has hundreds of revisions, this is a way to delete some of that cruft if you decided your site is not meant to be a repository of every decision you've ever made. So you can keep your database smaller if that becomes a concern. Notifications is another piece that means a lot to me. I've seen this more than anything else when interviewing stakeholders, that they've added content to the system. Now what do they do? And so being able to send an email that says, thank you for your submission. This has been forwarded along to XYZ's team. We will let you know when it's been when it's ready for review, and then being able to track those steps as content moves through those states and transitions, being able to send automated messages. Here are some of the modules that I've used in the past to help. The biggest one is actually this message stack, which is difficult to get started, but it's amazingly powerful because it acknowledges that folks may want to subscribe to multiple types of message queues and maybe get their notifications as a push notification on their phone, or as an email, or as a text message, or as a batch of messages put to Slack. So there are a number of tools that will let users or roles or teams subscribe to notifications as content moves through transitions. The ones above are a little easier to set up, and this last one though has a lot of power in it. And so I'm going to leave you with this last little message. Incorporating all of these features into a digital workflow, it can create a complex and costly investment. But integrating your CMS into how your team works and how you're ready to communicate, it has a lot of value in making sure that your work is timely, accurate, and that all your content can be consistent with your site's design. So if your end users face unreasonable requirements to use your CMS, if they're going to struggle to publish content, they're less likely to feel a sense of ownership towards your site and your CMS. And in terms of ensuring that your website looks its best and functions its best, you want people to have a sense of ownership. So I hope that you're able to create editorial workflows that empower your users and give them a strong sense of ownership and remove any barriers for them to be able to create their content. I want to thank you. I made sure to leave time at the end here so we can dive more into the code itself, the modules I used, or just answer questions along the way about these slides, stakeholders I've interviewed in the past, pain points, things of that nature. Any questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat, although I do see at least one in the Q&A. Oh, cool. There's a bunch in the Q&A. Could I please share a link to my slide deck? Will do. I will figure out where to put that. And if all else fails, I will drop it in Slack on the Drupal GovCon Slack. Second question, what is a better tool for revision tracking other than the diff module? I've struggled with this because I have not found any PHP platform that does what I would expect from something like a Microsoft Word, standard word processing. So I've embraced third-party tools when that becomes a priority, not trying to recreate the benefits of something if I don't need to. There is a website I work on with a lot of long-form content, and a copywriter works with a team of stakeholders to craft these long posts over a course of months before they go live. We use Gather Content, and in that case, Drupal's API is pulling in Gather Content. There's a Gather Content module. I've absolutely loved it. The creative team has absolutely loved it. And it was us accepting that Drupal was not the right tool for the job. Diff will work. It is a pain point. It is very much limited, and I have not found something that's better. Next question. For content that is tied to menus, will menu be updated when content state is changed from publish to draft? Yes. So they are separate systems, but the out-of-the-box Drupal menu system is going to look at the permissions for each item in that menu before rendering that menu. If you're an anonymous user, it's able to cache that, so we know what the menu looks like for anonymous users. But when you're logged in, it is going to check that user's access for every menu item. And access can be derived based on your role. Maybe some roles have access to certain nodes. It can be based on your permission. So you have permission to view this one status report page, and so that page will appear in the menu. You have permission to view published nodes of type post. And so if you have that permission, great. If you have permission to view drafts, then it will appear. So on one site I worked on recently, this was for a nonprofit, the site owners were regularly adding pages to a menu that were unpublished. And it became a source of confusion because when someone was logged into the site, they would see that page in the menu because they had access. But if they logged out, they wouldn't see the page anymore. So the menu system was checking the individual user's permission and showing or hiding. For us, it meant adding a little bit extra CSS that made that menu link just look a little grayed out, still readable, but off. And that way folks know, okay, that's a menu link that's currently unpublished. So the permission system is separate, but there's several ways to interact with it, including the types of permissions we do with content moderation. Another question related to moderation in D9, how are you handling scheduling changes, not just publish/archive, but things like promote, remove from homepage, etc.? I have a few ways. Um, I'm a backend developer, so I end up doing a lot of things in custom code that are not as easy to package. And anytime I find a way to make it into a custom module, I gladly will. My number one way to unblock people, and I don't have a slide for this, but I will mention that the websites I work on, like in this case, I have a manage applications. I will very often create a management dashboard for every content type. So manage events, manage news, manage products, whatever those may be. I don't think I added one for this demo. So, okay, we'll stick to the main content piece. What I found is the use of actions has been a lifesaver for a lot of the folks that I work with, where they want to see the most recent news articles and they want to change which ones are promoted. So they can pick 2 or 3 of them, and those are the ones they want to promote to the homepage. And we're using this custom action promote to front page. That's going to edit each one of these nodes in turn, check that box, or make sure the box is checked and save that node. That is using a system in Drupal that already exists, so that probably didn't answer your question in a meaningful way, but I bring it up because it is very easy to create new custom actions. Working with a higher education site, there was a content type called program, and the programs had, they were like degrees. The tuition rates would change regularly, so somebody needed to update tuition rates once a year. And it was important for legal reasons to update that across 100 and some programs for undergraduate, and then the graduates had their own tuition segments. So being able to check all the content in the dashboard, click a custom action that said update tuition, and then we made a box pop up. What's the new tuition rate, price per credit? And put the value, click save. And now every single one of those nodes was edited, the value changed and saved. So sorry if I didn't answer your original question, which is how do we improve things like auto publishing, scheduling changes like that. But there is a nice way to batch manually change them. And I've gotten a lot of utility out of that. Another question, when you send a message with the moderation log message, is that sending an actual notification like an email or just something to show them in the history of the node? It can be both. Out of the box, it's just going to create a log message. So I think I created one recently in this test, which I don't believe is published. So I have this unpublished node. Let me click on it. And right now, if I go to the revisions interface, this is just out of the box Drupal, I'll see that there is a log message here. And I just said ready for review. But I could have put a more meaningful message per revision. So not helpful. It's capturing that information, but it's not doing much with it. Most of the notification modules that I listed on the previous slide will let you create an email template that says what is being forwarded to the users. And it usually includes any of the properties of the node, like the log message. So that is a chance for you to pass on this message through an email and say, node XYZ has changed status from this to that. So folks need action, action needs to be taken place. I usually put less is more in that notification email. I also like using that message stack module, so it doesn't have to be an email. Integration with Slack or SMS has been very helpful, especially for things that are sensitive. So if you're on a website where there's like an alert content type and it needs to be a status bar across the website, that might be worth even an elevated message if that makes sense for your organization. The other thing I'll do is I will take this list of notifications and I'll put it right on the node, maybe in an ancillary piece, like on a sidebar, so we can see the full revision log. There's a few ways to do that in Drupal. And so you see the complete history of this, and folks can read through and see the sets of changes. Of course, only logged in users have permission to see the revisioning information, can see those log messages. So that's something I like to do. I believe you can do that all by, I may be wrong, by managing the content type and going to manage display and looking at the revision log information and moving that to the right spot in the form. I could be wrong on that one. You might need a custom module to surface those log messages. And I think that's the end of the questions I have here. Let me see if there's anything in chat. And that is it. So I think I'm a couple of minutes over. Thank you all for hanging out with me. This is a topic that means a lot to me. All my code is on GitHub. So feel free if you're curious how I created the custom buttons or dashboards, check me out. I'm ngim. This is at ngim/workflow. I'll post a link to the slides here in GitHub, but I'll also find a place to put them on the Drupal GovCon, and reach out if you'd like to ever keep this conversation going. Thank you. Enjoy your conference. Can't wait till we can all do this in person again. Okay, I see some additional questions. I was reading them backwards. So the most recent questions were on top. Does moderation work well with multilingual? When we publish a draft, can we decide to publish just the English version without promoting other language? Yes, you can publish the individual languages individually. That's part of just how Drupal does multilingual sites, because they may be very different content. Even the sites that have automatically translated things may miss components. For example, contact information may not make sense on for a US company. They might have a 1-800 number, and that whole block is not going to be included on their international version of the node. So they are very much forked versions, and they have their own publishing needs. Have you used the workplaces module? Any thoughts of it? I did this presentation once before. Someone recommended it, so it's on my to-do list. I haven't tried it yet. And another question, can variables be inserted into the content so values can be changed once and updated across a set of pages, sent for review before publication? Yes, there's a few ways to do it. I have not seen a module that does this in a robust way. So there's a content token type module, but I've done this just with custom code. So I'll create a new configuration form in Drupal. This is a fairly easy developer task if you have someone on your team who's used to getting their hands dirty in code. So I'll create a new page here, somewhere in this config or in the content, which is going to be tokens that I use across the site. An example, I worked on a legal site where there was some contextually aware contact information where folks needed help. There was like a crisis number. There was another one for family law issues, a lot of sensitive information that appeared in multiple parts of the site. I made that a custom form, form, and there were some tokens that we can use in our content, much like WordPress shortcodes, if you've used those. So being able to drop those tokens right in the WYSIWYG and use them. I did not add content moderation to configuration. That is a little more challenging. You'd have to get into custom entities and stuff, but there is a ways to use variables in things like your WYSIWYGs. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the conference.